Hi, I'm Deborah Shillette Wilson,
I'm Kathy McCommon.
And I'm Ann Rodelfs.
and welcome to our skit on the rock mineral vegetable animal and how it's playing out in the world today. So I'm just at a loss.
I hope you enjoyed our skit. What we were trying to do was bring give you something to anchor to so that you could see some of these personalities, some of these levels of soul development in your own life and in your own family. Of course, we acted the skit out in a rather extreme manner, but we wanted to bring in all the various aspects of the rock stage, the vegetable stage, and then, of course, the animal stage. Now, bear in mind that this was a child that would have grown into this beautiful child stage that is inquisitive and is showing their emotions and wanting to embrace life. But if you'll notice through the skit, the mineral and the vegetable discounted all of that. That was completely suppressed and we told her, bury that. Those emotions, you don't need those emotions. You just need to be like us. So I hope you got a little bit of a feel for that.
And I see this in so many parts of our society as I walk around, in families, as you say, but also I see it in the educational system, the medical system, the legal system. Mm-hmm. So why don't we talk today a bit about each of those areas so people can really see, as you were mentioning, mm-hmm. where these youngest stages of development are, so we can do something about it.
Yes. We see these stages of development everywhere. The problem, I guess you might say, is that we're not trained to recognize them. So our purpose with the School of Soul is to help society or help you recognize these various stages of development so that you can navigate your life in a way that is healthy. Because if you don't know who you're dealing with and what stage of development they're in, you could find yourself like Deborah was, being forced into a stage of development that is unhealthy. Because what did? We told her she needed to be like the vegetable and mineral stage. Her emotions didn't matter. And we see that in society everywhere. In fact, Ann is medical. So Ann, tell us a little bit about what you see as far as those stages, how they're showing up. And we have a lot to do with medical right now. We have very rigid beliefs around the way that our bodies should be addressing COVID right now. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, how to identify someone stuck in the youngest stage of psychological or soul development is the utter rigidity. One way of perceiving, one way of doing, one way of thinking, one way of feeling, one way of relating. And what I saw in the medical system is these protocols that are set up. If someone comes in complaining of A, B, and C, you proceed to do D, E, and F without any consideration, sensing into your heart, thinking about it yourself. You follow protocol. And one problem with this is we are all different. We are all unique human beings. We're all at different stages in our development. And not everyone reacts to the same things in the same way. Not everything is healing and not everything is hurtful. So you have to know your individual patient. And to give an example, one time a baby had an infection and her doctor followed the protocol and gave her the medication and the baby instantly died. And when I asked this doctor, knowing how I would feel, I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Doing okay. I followed protocol and that was the right thing to do." Following protocol is the right thing to do when your patient dies? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. To me, if he had sensed into his humanity, he would have gotten no, not for this one. This child's different, and followed that human soul that knows what's best for others' human souls when it's clear and mature. And that's what we're about in the School of Soul, help people to heal their souls and mature their souls. So we're making better decisions and not following protocol.
Well, another thing that talking about that, I think that one of the indications that you are interacting with a rock or a vegetable, whether it be in the human form or in an organization, medical, education, whatever, is that they do not allow another voice to speak. Their way is the only way. No other way is considered.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, that is probably your biggest indication that you're dealing with a rock, mineral, or vegetable.
Yeah, the my way or the highway.
My way or the highway. And usually it's followed by some type of punishment if the person or the group is trying to speak up loudly against that. Because if they can't hush them and they still insist on speaking up against the rules of the vegetable or mineral, then punishment will be put into place.
Right. And this is actually a symptom of post-traumatic stress in the sense that they are recreating their childhood traumas of not being allowed their true way, their human soulful way, and they were severely punished. So they turned into a mindlessly doing the protocol type of rock or mineral lifestyle, and they're recreating that trauma of you have to do it too, or you're punished just like they were.
That's a good point, Anne. And we see that. We see that in our government. We see it in our medical system. We see it in our education system.
And we see it in families, because I work a lot with families and also with kids in the school system. And there was no looking at really trauma. I mean, that's been something that I've noticed for years, even in my own field. When a child's having behavior problems, the focus is just on the behavior problem. It's not looking at what may be going on with that child or what's happened to that child, or that they've even had some kind of trauma experience, because that is going to affect their especially their emotional development. So their ability to handle stress that, a lot of kids can handle, they may not be able to handle it, but they're going to get punished for it.
If you'll notice in the skit, one of the things that the vegetable, which that was me, continually did was tell the child, Deborah, that her emotions were not important, that she didn't need to feel that way, that she needed to feel like we felt about everything, and that she would eventually grow up to feel like us.
And rocks and minerals don't have healthy feelings, if any feelings at all. Any feelings would be programmed feelings, like I'm supposed to be happy, therefore, how are you? I am happy, rather than having honest contact with that emotional up and down.
Because if you remember, Deborah asked the mother, me, you don't look happy. I said, yes, I'm happy. Ha 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 ha. That's like a robot. That's like programmed. I'm happy. Ha ha ha. So, yeah.
I'm supposed to be happy.
I'm supposed to be happy because my mineral husband tells me I'm happy. He tells me how to be happy.
And so, well, I mean, even in my own family, it was very rigid. And the father was very rigid. And it was like, if you did not do what was said, what was told to you to do, your chores, the wonderful chore list, there was severe punishment. I mean, it could be, something, a beating, or it could be go to your room without any dinner, or, whatever. So it was like kind of like the rock was. It was just this immovable force in your life that no matter what you did, it didn't matter, because it was just this rigid person there. And
the mixed messages.
And you had to learn to comply. So what was okay for him was not okay for us.
I was hiding behind my newspaper. That was okay. But you hiding behind a door was not okay.
No. Or even if I made a sound that he considered disrespectful, that was actually a normal child developmental sound that I would make, like that. because I was told to do something that I wasn't ready to do. That was a transitional sound, if you understand child development, but I got punished for it. So it's like I couldn't even make a sound, not even let alone say words, but even just have a breath.
Well, the rocks and minerals have no ability to relate to human beings. And so to excuse themselves from that ability, they have to label and judge and condemn and punish people that do have that ability and are more authentic.
Yeah, well, and children have a lot of emotions, and expressions until you start beating that out of them, whether it's with words or physically.
Well, if you'll notice the vegetable stage, which is what I was mirroring to you in this little drama that we worked out, I did not have any thoughts of my own. I was basically a puppet to the rock, and I acted that out. And I had no emotions that were really my own, and I didn't allow anyone around me to have authentic emotions. That was ridiculous. You should just be happy.
And from the child's perspective, it was both of these people were frustrating, but more so than that, there was no emotional needs getting met.
And you see also the rock, mineral, vegetable, we have no boundaries. Boundaries don't even exist in our world. So if you'll notice, I was not going to allow her to close her door off from me. And I told her I had another entrance to her room. I could come in anytime I wanted. And if she didn't straighten up, I was going to take her door down. And so when you have those type of people running the show in your government, your education, your medical system, and in your home, no one has any rights or boundaries. The only rights are the mineral rock and the vegetable. That's it.
And then what she gets is just a reflection of what is allowed. So it's not like you're really creating it yourself. You're just kind of going along mindlessly. A child can see that because the child could see that, but over time, I guess over the course of the skit, you could see the child getting more and more just into desperation.
For almost like a frozen, I mean, because if you remember, Deborah's head was down. And so she had ran. That was a response to trauma. She ran and hid. But then she also just became frozen. Now, she had a little bit of a fighting spirit at the beginning, if you'll remember. She was, talking back and resisting. So she went through that fight part of it. And then she ended up in the freeze part where she just gave up. And so how many children or how many adults that are living in this very rock, mineral, vegetable society are just throwing their hands up and giving up?
Yeah. And so eventually the child would end up complying and becoming like what she didn't want to be, because it would just be
easier.
Well, I think when you get to that kind of despairing, hopeless place, I think that it makes you vulnerable to whatever is being fed to you, that you just, you just can't not take it in. It just becomes interjected into you and becomes part of things that are unconscious and you're not aware of, that you split off from. And then you go out in the world, and a lot of times I find that with parents, they may come from abusive backgrounds and they made promises to themselves about, when I grow up, I'm not going to do that to my child. And then they're like, I don't know why, but I'm doing the same thing to my kid that I said I wouldn't do that my parents did to me. Well, because they split that off. It's not really a healed part of themselves.
It becomes their shadow, part of their shadow self.
And so they reenact that out on their children, and children are very good triggers for any kind of unresolved trauma that a parent has had that they're not aware of. And unfortunately, I don't know that that's really looked at in the Child Protective Services system. That to really have a fuller view of this kind of dynamic that's going on. because people need to be helped to get through it. They're not going to necessarily be able to do it on their own.
Yes, since we're assessing children academically, we need to be assessing them psychologically, where they are in their soul development, so we know what to expect from them. For example, I know children who are older adults or older kids or adults who've gotten into trouble with the law, and developmentally, they're not at a place yet that they can follow rules. They're still preschool and below. And to expect them to follow rules when they're that damaged isn't a reasonable expectation. It's like handing you that rule book and expecting you to follow it. You're not at 9, you're not have the ability to read that, memorize it, and follow those rules. So it's another way of not being able to give kids what they need and using them to meet our needs as far as dysfunctional family, making them look bad and feeling good about punishing them when what we're doing is recreating our traumas.
Yeah.
And
And I
mental
saw,
stage is just frozen in trauma. They're frozen in recreating what damaged them so thoroughly.
and I saw that happen in the school system too, because of the, no tolerance. I mean, what is that? No tolerance if that's not a rock.
Zero tolerance.
The zero tolerance. And so kids would make statements that are really normal things that kids say, but now they've been criminalized. So terroristic threats is the label that a kid gets when they threaten another child. I'm going to beat you up, or I'm going to kill you, or I don't like that teacher and I'm going to kill them. In the heat of the moment, when they're in their more of their primitive part of their brain, is where comments like that are going to come out. But it's, because that's the rule, you don't say those things or do those things, and they either get kicked out of school or they go to AEP. But what was driving that behavior, whatever was happening
In their environment.
or with them psychologically, none of that gets addressed. So, and then a lot of kids grow up, and then they get into juvenile, then they get into the regular adult system, but they're delayed in their development emotionally and maybe sometimes cognitively because other things have not been addressed. And to me, that's a shame, because the education system all along the way has all these opportunities to step in and help kids and help families. And, not saying that teachers are the ones that need to be the ones to do all that, but we need some kind of mechanism in there that really works. Because what kids tell me a lot of times about counselors in schools, they don't get to do counseling. They're too busy trying to get in high school. It's getting the kids to college and
or filling out paperwork,
or
mountains of paperwork.
or doing some kind of helping with administration when they have, when that program years ago was designed to have counselors in schools where they're working with kids, helping them with their social and emotional development. I don't know what the heck happened to that, but somebody wants to look at why things are the way they are. I think that's a good place to look, because that never got addressed.
We need to screen for rocks and minerals in every aspect of society.
Yeah, make sure they do not hold any level of influence until they can be mended. Would you say also, not only in the school system is soul development and trauma not considered, but it sounds like they're not even considering brain development, because the frontal cortex doesn't even fully develop until their 20s, which is their ability to say, if I do this, this will happen. Well, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, they're not going to think that. They're going to be acting on emotions. And so no telling what's going to come out of their mouths. And so we're going to consider them a terrorist, and they need to be expelled from school and labeled as a violent person at 5 years old. Something's wrong with that.
Well, it's because we're our child developmentally illiterate in this country. And I think that's a big issue, because when a child doesn't get their developmental needs in their childhood, they don't just all of a sudden magically when they turn 18 get them. They just take all that out into their their adulthood and reenact it
Well,
because they don't know what else to do.
well, talking about that, let's say that you have a family of siblings that have endured severe trauma when they were growing up. They all grow up to be adults. There's no way that some of those siblings aren't going to be stuck in a soul developmental stage of mineral or vegetable, and maybe have many of them. And then you may have those that aren't stuck in that developmental stage, may be stuck in the animal stage, feed me, pet me, love me, everybody like me. So how do you deal with that in a family unit when you have maybe one or two more vegetables and mineral rocks? It can cause a lot of chaos in a family, consistent chaos, because nobody has a voice in the family but those two levels of development. When they are acting out their trauma and they are recreating it and bringing in other family members to play the roles of their trauma, which is what they do, how do you navigate that? How do you get through that, Anne? What do you do?
Well, as was said, there's no getting through. You said that there's no getting through. And so it is not an easy task to take on. It usually takes many, many years, even decades, to make some shifts. So what I recommend, if you have a rock or mineral in the family, is if you can get them to change in any way. Instead of having eggs and bacon for breakfast, how about granola? How about banana? Any little shift away from my way. I've always done it this way. This is my way. To get them to come up with, maybe we could do it differently. How about we go to work a different way this time? Anyway, let's vacation in a different spot this year. Any way you can get them to shift. That's really the developmental priority for someone stuck in rocks and minerals, just helping them change ever so slightly.
Yeah, because you can't take the messy out of growth. Growth is just messy. Whether it's us individually or whether we're supporting someone else in their growth and development. And it is little baby steps. I consistently will make the shift. It's not some kind of quantum leap. That people, well, let's see, I'm on a timetable here. How long is it going to take for me to get through this?
And how, what about the person that has the soul development? They have done the work and they are at the higher stages of soul development. How does that person navigate, the rocks, minerals, vegetables, animals within the family unit without just giving up on them? Sometimes that's
it's actually useful.
Yeah, sometimes it's about all you can do.
Yeah, sometimes you have to go without them. And that's sad, or maybe not have as much contact. I don't know, kind of. I think about, you circle back around and check in with them every now and then.
That's a good idea.
See where they're at and see if they're more, open to what you want to do. It's not like you throw them on the garbage heap of life, but you do, I think, have to make some judgments about when to be around and, when not to be around them.
They do have a tendency to kind of gaslight the other people. And of course, gaslighting is, it's it's kind of a new term now that we're seeing a lot in social media, because we're seeing people gaslight. Well, gaslighting is making someone feel like they're crazy, or they're not seeing things correctly, or
that's like what you did to me.
Exactly.
In the skit.
Exactly.
You don't feel that way.
No, you don't
understand.
You're just not, your perception is wrong.
Perception.
And so that is one of the biggest tools that those lower stages of development use and it can make you feel like you're crazy, like you
certainly did.
Yeah. Well, because they're discounting everything about you. they're almost dehumanizing you because
They are dehumanizing.
They are.
dehumanizing.
That's what happened to them. That's what they pass on. And they always have a dangerous side. So be very, very careful when you're dealing with people in these youngest stages of development. They can be very
That
dangerous.
shadow or dark side.
Because if they're operating in a way where they feel justified in dehumanizing someone and labeling them as less than whatever, that can be dangerous. It can be dangerous emotionally, mentally, and physically to other people.
Yeah, especially if you stand up for yourself.
If you stand up for yourself, that's when you're really going to
set
see
a boundary. And you set a boundary.
You will, that because as long as you're in agreement with them, as you saw in the skit, we were in total agreement with the rock. And all we wanted to do was make sure the rock was happy, the rock wasn't upset, the rock's rules were followed. And the rock didn't have to do anything but sit behind the newspaper and every once in a while, don't forget the rules. As long as, and of course the vegetable, the puppet completely supported the rock.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't a we, that was a you, because the child wasn't in agreement.
No, the child
It was a psychological we, because every vegetable has many parts. They are split, as you will recall, with above ground and below ground.
Yeah, because see, wasn't I nice? I was very nice. But in the same respect, I was saying, no, your feelings don't matter.
That wasn't nice.
Get rid of that. That wasn't nice at all.
A nice tone.
But I drank my tea.
Like a good wife.
And said, I'm happy. Don't feel that way, Deborah. Those feelings are wrong. Agree with the rock.
Yeah, so we pass things on not knowingly, and it's important to become aware of that within ourselves so that we can grow, even though it's messy. We were designed to grow and develop and evolve. And
I just want to add, when we see so many rocks and minerals taking over our society and every institution in our society, it's time to really look inside at the rock and mineral within each of us. We all have one. It's just a matter, have we made it conscious and we're allowing the divine hand to move through it, or is it unconscious and doing unto others what was done unto us without our knowledge?
Yeah,
because remember, a society is a reflection of what's going on behind those masked families.
Yeah, that's what that persona that we put out there that isn't necessarily who we really are. It's just that fake part.
I kind of like to talk a little bit in my personal conversations about persona. And we did a video on persona. And a lot of these rocks, minerals, vegetables, animals, particularly the rocks, minerals, and vegetables, they live with a persona. That is their mask, is their persona. And they have to have very strict rules and structure in their lives in order for them to feel safe. Because remember, they're survivors of trauma when they didn't feel safe. And so what we've had this last year is a complete change of the rules, and new rules have been put into place, very strict rules, which, the rock, mineral, vegetables love the rules. And so now all of a sudden we find ourselves living in a society that is ruled by rocks, minerals, and vegetables. But it starts in the home. That's where it starts. And then, because we accept it in our home, we accept it in our society. So, and then also, these rocks, minerals, vegetables, animals, they can make you mad. They can cause, emotions that are, that these soul developments just kind of feed off of, and it just escalates. So, you need to be aware that they're doing their thing.
Recreating the trauma.
Recreating their trauma.
Well, and see, also I think it's becoming more and more, at least for some of us, aware that we have intergenerational trauma, we have collective trauma, we have individual trauma. And those all, I guess you could say, work together to keep some of, us and people in place of
Mhm,
some of these lower levels of soul development because we're not addressing the trauma.
mhm,
I mean, I've been counseling for, I don't know, over 30 years now. And I'm still finding people that have never heard the information I give them
mhm,
to help them heal because they never connected how trauma has impacted their lives and how they played it out and sometimes are really horrified to, that's that messy growth
mhm.
of becoming aware of when you don't feel safe and you're afraid of other people, you don't realize sometimes how other people are afraid of you. Well, thank you for listening, and we hope that, we've maybe lightened up the difficult the things that we're talking about. They are challenging. We understand that, but it's also, we know that there's another side to a lot of things that maybe you don't know, and we'd love to be your guides.
Yeah, and opportunities. There's so much opportunity for growth. Even though
Mhm.
you look out in the world and it looks very chaotic and maybe for some people kind of scary, but if you can look at it as opportunities for growth and new beginnings, it can really change. It can really shift your attitude. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.